If you're like every other anime watcher on the planet, you were probably majorly let down by the anime adaptation of Tokyo Ghoul. It's no fault of the story itself, of course, considering the manga wasn't over at the time, and the studio behind it decided to go off script in the weirdest ways. So, if you never picked up the manga, believing it might be the same disappointment, nobody can blame you. The source material, though, diverges in massive ways, so we've gone through everything to bring you a recap of the real Tokyo Ghoul, not the garbage that got animated. The first opening song still slaps, though. Everything opens with Ken Kaneki, a college student who spends most of his days reading pulp horror novels in his favorite cafe, Anteku. One day, he brings his best friend Hyde with him, mostly so he can point out a girl that he really likes. The two laugh and joke around, with Hyde hitting on Tuka, a waitress that works there, before leaving and wishing Kaneki good luck on his dating aspirations. Well, the girl actually walks by and strikes up a conversation with Kaneki, much to his very flustered surprise. She says her name is Rize, and that she loves the same types of books as he does. In truth, she's been watching him for a while, and ends up asking Kaneki out on a date. A shonen main character getting a date in the first chapter totally isn't a huge red flag though, right? While they're getting to know each other though, the news in the background gives a vague warning. Ghoul attacks are being reported in high frequency nearby. See, this version of Japan is populated by creatures called ghouls, strange beings that feed on humans for sustenance. Kaneki doesn't think they're nearly that dangerous, but he's about to get a first-hand experience in just how deadly ghouls can be. The time comes for their date, so Ken meets up with Rize at a small cafe where they discuss their favorite books, bonding over a writer they both love. Kaneki notices that she's not really eating, and Rize makes an excuse that she's trying to lose weight, so he doesn't think much of it. When the time comes for them to leave, she asks Kaneki to walk her home, and he agrees, though is rather innocent about it. Well, it's a mistake that will come back to bite him, literally. Rize suddenly starts monologuing, telling Kaneki how easy of a mark he was before biting down into his neck and shoulder, starting to eat him. He tries to run away, desperately making a move to leave, before she causes tendrils of darkness to appear from her body, stabbing him right through the kidneys. He thinks his life is over, bleeding out against a wall as she makes her way closer, intending to chow down on the poor kid like a rabid 5-year-old at Chuck E. Cheese, before being taken out by a bunch of steel beams that fall from the building above them, crushing her. She's killed almost instantly, while the noise brings over some bystanders who find Kaneki still barely clinging to life. He's taken to a hospital where urgent surgery is performed, with the doctor making a controversial decision that will change Kaneki's life forever. He transplants Rize's undamaged organs into Kaneki, saving his life but turning him into a ghoul in the process. He wakes up in the hospital days later, unsure of how he survived, but things begin a slow descent into hell for him from there. The hospital food he's brought is inedible, tasting so foul that it makes him want to puke at the slightest taste. Kaneki is shook when a nurse eats some of it right in front of him, saying it's delicious. Meanwhile, he's only able to stomach small amounts of water as he recovers. Eventually, he's released from the hospital, but a whole new struggle kicks in as he has to deal with his mounting hunger. Nothing is edible, no matter how much he tries to make it so. Meat tastes gamey, vegetables rotten, and even the freshest of foods make him puke as if they've spoiled weeks ago. Nothing seems to work for him, and the hunger is really starting to settle in. Kaneki begins to grapple with the realization that Rize's organs have changed him on a cellular level, learning that ghouls can't eat human food due to a special enzyme they create. This makes it so that only human meat is considered edible to their palate, and just further destroys any of the hope he has at living a normal life. Hyde keeps checking in on him as he misses more and more class, unsure of what's happening to Kaneki. Meanwhile, this book nerd can only compare his situation to Kafka's Bugman in the Metamorphosis, realizing that his body is changing beyond his control. Eventually, he walks out of his apartment one night, the hunger gnawing at his stomach, and witnesses Tuka, the waitress from Anteiku, being harassed by a creep on the sidewalk. To his shock, she kills the man, revealing she's a ghoul by ripping his arm off and offering it to Kaneki, super casually by the way, except he finds that he's drooling as he watches the blood spill on the sidewalk. Kaneki runs away in fear, unsure of what this means for him. Tuka just shrugs, cleaning the body up and saving it for herself, assuming Kaneki just couldn't handle her aura. Kaneki resolves that he's not going to be like that, but the hunger doesn't leave him alone. At one point, it's so bad that he's started chewing on his own fingers, though the taste of a ghoul doesn't do much for him. One night, he begins going through everything he has, desperate to find something normal, and realizes that coffee actually tastes fine. Ecstatic that he can drink something normal, he makes his way out to the convenience store, wearing an eye patch as his left eye has begun turning red like a ghoul does. While out, he picks up a few different types of pre-made coffees, but his troubles begin as he leaves the store, taking a turn down an alleyway to find a ghoul feeding on a freshly dead human. His appetite goes into overdrive, with Kaneki drooling at the sight of the dead body in front of him. The other ghoul tells him to scram, but it only takes a moment before he's suddenly killed. A young man who Kaneki had just seen buying coffee at the convenience store kicks the ghoul's head off, telling Kaneki that he's on his turf. Things begin to look bleak for Kaneki as the imposing ghoul mentions that this ward is his for hunting and that Kaneki is going to die for trespassing. He goes in for an attack. Kaneki, still frozen in hunger and fear, but is suddenly stopped by Tuka, who appears to save him. She mentions that Nishio, the menacing ghoul, is only talking big because Rize is dead now and he was weaker than her. Tuka explains further that this ward is Anteku's territory and that they look after any of the ghouls that live there, so he shouldn't need to be killing people. Kaneki ends up running off as Tuka and Nishio have a little standoff, with the waitress eventually calling someone in to help her clean up the mess. Still hungry, Kaneki holds up back at home, unsure of where to go from here but knowing that he needs to eat soon. After a long, sleepless night, Kaneki shows up at Anteiku the next day, one eye discolored, crying. He begs Tuka and Mr. Yoshimura, the owner-manager, to help him, saying he doesn't know what else to do. They're just closing up. But Mr. Yoshimura, a kind man, takes pity on the young hybrid boy. He unlocks the cafe, bringing Kaneki down to a small cold storage area underneath it and handing him a package containing human meat. Tuka isn't too happy about it, shouting that she tried helping Kaneki before but he wouldn't take it. Mr. Yoshimura asks her if she knows what happened to Rize, mentioning that her organs were transplanted into a human who survived the accident. Tuka goes quiet, unsure of what to think, but realizes that Kaneki is the human who received Rize's organs. As Kaneki leaves, Yoshimura mentions that it's his and Anteiku's purpose to help all the ghouls in the 20th ward, whether they deserve that help or not. Tuka goes quiet, thinking it over. Back at his house, Kaneki grapples with his own hunger, still refusing to eat the human meat that Yoshimura gave him. He desperately tries to make it more palatable to his human mind, but nothing works, and even trying to just down a ton of condiments does nothing for his hunger. Look, as smart as Kaneki can be, and as much as he knows not eating will come back to bite him in the ass, he just can't reconcile his ghoul appetite with his human feelings. The next day, he returns to school, meeting up with Hyde, who's speaking with some other guys. Hyde mentions that he's joined the school festival committee, something that looks good on his transcripts. The other two guys, also part of the committee, mention that they need him to go get a DVD of the previous year's festival so they have it for some presentation. They tell him that a guy named Nishio has it, and when Hyde leaves to go get it, Kaneki tags along. Cue his surprise when they reach the dorm room and he realizes that it's the same Nishio who he saw just a couple of nights ago kicking a ghoul's head off. The very same guy that then threatened to kill Kaneki for being on his turf. Hyde walks in without knocking, intruding on Nishio, who had a girl sitting on his lap surrounded by bottles of coffee. Kaneki wonders if the woman is a ghoul too, or if Nishio was planning on eating her at some point, but is interrupted when the newfound threat clocks who he is. Kaneki tries to play it cool, hoping that nothing bad is going to happen, but he's a little obvious. Hyde seems to pick up on it as well. After looking around his apartment for a few minutes, Nishio is unable to find the DVD and says he probably took it home to his house across town in the 20th ward. Despite Hyde's protests that he'll go along with Nishio to get it and Kaneki doesn't have to tag along, worry keeps tugging at Kaneki that something will happen. All three decide to go, beginning the walk across town as Kaneki's mind races by faster than cars on the street. On their way, Hyde sees a store selling some stuffed fish cakes and mentions how delicious they sound. He treats the others, unknowing that both of them are ghouls and unable to eat real human food. Kaneki barely touches his, insisting that he'll save it for later. He waits for Nishio to just toss his without eating it, but to his surprise, the ghoul takes a bite, mentioning that it's delicious. Well, Kaneki's flabbers are gasted at this point, and he has no idea how in the world someone who he knows is a ghoul is eating human food this easily. They continue on, Nishio and Hyde BSing about the school festival coming up as Kaneki is lost in his own mind. Suddenly, they turn down an alleyway, with Nishio saying it's a shortcut to get to his place. They're barely out of the street when the ghoul suddenly bashes Hyde, knocking him out into a pile of trash. Like any good villain, Nishio starts his monologue, asking Kaneki if he was planning on eating Hyde before Nishio got to them instead. He mentions that Hyde is observant, and it's hard to be friends with someone like that, especially for ghouls. What would happen if Hyde caught on to Kaneki being a ghoul? Would he finally just eat him to be rid of the problem? He taunts Kaneki for a moment more before making himself throw up the food they had stopped to get, talking about how awful it tasted. Honestly, man, we know you're a ghoul, but wasting food in this economy? Dick move. Knowing that it's not just him, but his best friend in danger as well, Kaneki has flashbacks of Hyde first initiating their friendship. He had just moved to Tokyo, knowing nobody, and Kaneki was one of the first people he spoke to, hoping to become friends. The flashbacks give Kaneki the resolve to fight for his best friend, but it's really no use, since even as a ghoul, Kaneki is still just a wimp. Nishio beats the living crap out of him, giving Kaneki his first hints of the pain to come with his life as a ghoul, and throws him aside in the garbage. As Kaneki fades in and out of consciousness, Nishio grabs Hyde, saying he's going to go ahead and eat him to get rid of the foul taste of the human food he had. Between Kaneki's tormented emotions and the hunger he feels, something breaks. Massive tendrils of darkness, just like Rize used on the human Kaneki only weeks ago, pour out of him, rushing towards Nishio and stabbing right through him with ease. It surprises the ghoul, who mentions that this is something called a kagune and one that formerly belonged to Rize. Kaneki isn't listening though, and instead goes nearly blind with rage, attacking Nishio again before passing out himself. To his surprise, he wakes up on a couch in a nice room. Unsure of where he is, all he can think about is Hyde, and runs from the room to find his friend enjoying a cup of coffee, flirting with Tuka, and being his usual self. They're in Anteiku, taken there by Tuka after she found them all passed out. Turns out she was keeping an eye on them after the run-in with Nishio and made up some story about the three of them being victims of a hit-and-run accident. She lies to Hyde, telling him that his injuries were serious enough that he had to be hospitalized. Meanwhile, nobody really knows where he went, but that his wounds were relatively serious. Hyde leaves Anteku, but Kaneki stays behind, hoping to speak to Tuka and Yoshimura about what happened to them. To his surprise, Yoshimura offers him a job there, telling the young man that he wants to help him learn more about the world of ghouls. Yoshimura believes that Kaneki is the key to bridging their two worlds, making life more sustainable not just for humans but ghouls as well. Kaneki accepts, heading home for the night to get ready for his classes and first day of work the next day. Before he leaves though, Yoshimura gives him a specially made cube of something human. He says Kaneki can put it in his coffee and it will help suppress his hunger, but notes that it's not a substitute for an actual good meal. Turns out they did have to force feed him a little bit of human meat while he was knocked out in order to get him to heal, and it also turned his eye back to the normal color. As Kaneki goes to bed that night, the scene flashes over to a strange man walking the streets of the 20th Ward, carrying an attaché briefcase. He says that he knows there are ghouls hiding out here, giving an ultimatum that he's going to hunt them down. The page reveals the man, with one eye massive and bulging like he's losing his mind, before cutting to black. Not villainous at all, right? Real quick, if you want more in-depth breakdowns of some of the best anime and manga out there, make sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons. Every little bit helps us bring you more content. The next day, Kaneki starts his new job, getting lessons on brewing the perfect cup of coffee from Yoshimura while learning about Anteiku. A haven for ghouls, Anteiku serves as a sanctuary in the 20th Ward, serving humans as well, while also being somewhere that ghouls can come for coffee and assistance if they don't feel like they can hunt. Turns out, most of the regular patrons are ghouls, alongside all the employees. Tuka is still acting cold toward Kaneki, but over the course of his first day, he meets others that start to give him a more informed view of ghoul society. Among the new people he meets are Ryoko, a woman who recently lost her husband to ghoul investigators, and Hinami, her 10-year-old daughter. After Ryoko's husband was killed by investigators, who the ghouls refer to as doves, she comes to Anteiku in order to feed their daughter. Kaneki discovers her by accidentally walking in on Hinami eating in one of the upper rooms, her eyes going red as she devours the plate of human in front of her. Yoshimura apologizes, saying he should have warned Kaneki she was up there. Before long, the women leave and Kaneki gets the story about Ryoko's husband, who she's still in the process of mourning. It was only a couple of weeks ago that he died, and as it turns out, he was killed by the same investigator that was seen earlier. After Anteiku closes that day, Yoshimura summons Kaneki and Tuka to one of the upper rooms, revealing a ham and cucumber sandwich sitting on the counter. This, Yoshimura says, is his first lesson in being a ghoul, learning to eat human food again. He has Tuka demonstrate. She takes small bites, pretending to chew, but instead swallowing the small mouthfuls of food immediately before making a satisfied look. When Kaneki tries, he ends up throwing up almost immediately, unsure of how she was able to stomach it. Everything tastes rotten, like something scraped out of the garbage. But Yoshimura tells him that with time and practice, he'll be able to go out with his friends and pretend to eat like normal. It just takes a little art of deception. Before they leave, Yoshimura requests that Tuka take Kaneki on Saturday to have a mask made. When Kaneki questions him on it, Yoshimura points out that it's something ghouls do for their own protection, wearing masks when they step out to feed in case they run into any doves while they're out. Without the masks, their identity would be plain to see, and that could end up disastrous for not only them, but those close to them. Tuka unwillingly agrees, telling Kaneki to meet her on Saturday at the train station. They travel across the ward, entering a small art shop run by a ghoul named Uta, who begins taking Kaneki's measurements. He asks him a lot of questions, notably about the eye patch, and Kaneki explains that he wears it because he can't control his eye turning red when he gets hungry. After some time, Uta has everything he needs and mentions that he'll have the mask ready for him in a few days. The next day at work, it's just Kaneki and Enji, a waiter who's more goofball than ghoul, working as Tuka took the day off to study for exams. Enji tells Kaneki that he used to be known as the Devil Ape of the 20th Ward, bragging about his former badassery, while also being one of the goofiest looking guys in Anteku. While Tuka is at home studying for her exams, Kaneki gets tasked with a new job by Yoshimura: join a ghoul named Yomo to go collect more human meat. Kaneki clarifies that he'll help as long as he doesn't have to kill anyone, and Yoshimura reassures him that he won't have to. After work that day, Kaneki loads up in Yomo's car. Yomo is around his 30s, cool and collected, the type that doesn't talk much. This flusters Kaneki, who just tries to make small talk as they drive, unsure of where they're going. But Yomo isn't an easy one to crack. Eventually, they stop on a deserted back highway, right behind another car that was abandoned on the side of the road. As they walk off the side of the highway, through the grass, Kaneki trips, falling down a small cliff. Thanks to his ghoul resiliency, he survives the fall unscathed, but is terrified to see a dead body waiting down at the bottom. He finds himself in an awkward Logan Paul situation before Yomo leaps down to join him, quipping that it must be his first time seeing a body, and tells Kaneki to stay on lookout while he does the dirty work. Kaneki looks away as Yomo chops up the body, dividing the meat from bone before packing it all away in a cooler to bring back to Anteiku. It's here that Kaneki finally realizes all the meat Anteiku offers is ethically sourced. Well, as ethically as it can be when you're eating humans. Yomo steps out every few days and searches some of the more popular suicide spots around the ward to collect bodies and bring them back. Despite the gruesomeness of the work, he still manages to show some form of reverence to the dead, offering a prayer before chopping them up. Still better than Logan Paul. They head back to Anteiku after the deed is done, but stop as they see a woman walking along the road. Both of them recognize her as they get close, realizing it's Ryoko, who was out visiting her husband's grave. Yomo tells her it's dangerous, especially since the ghoul investigators are still out looking, but she says she just wanted to visit him. The next day, Kaneki is working again as Tuka is still out studying, but he finds Hinami upstairs reading. To his surprise, the child is reading a collection of short stories by his favorite author, but having having trouble understanding some of the more complicated kanji used in the writing. He bonds with the girl, teaching her to read as her mother tells Yoshimura that she's ready to stop relying on Anteiku and go out to hunt for herself. Though Yoshimura understands her decision, he warns her to be cautious due to the doves currently floating around the 20th ward. She also reveals that she buried her husband's mask at his grave when she was out the day before, finally coming to terms with his death. Speaking of doves, they're on the hunt. Eamon, the younger of the two investigators sent from the main headquarters, along with Mado, the crazy-eyed man seen earlier, has a hunch that he can find the wife of the ghoul they killed earlier. It was him and Mado who killed Ryoko's husband, and as it turns out, they've been tailing Ryoko ever since. Though he can't get the approval from Mado or headquarters, Amon ends up going to her husband's grave, digging it up to find the mask. He informs Mado, who sets in motion an operation to catch Ryoko. Nobody really questions him digging up a grave though, kind of weird. The mother and daughter leave Anteiku later that day as the rain begins to come down. Thanks to the weather, they're unable to sense the danger closing in on them, and within moments both are surrounded by doves who are looking to kill them. Ryoko attempts to fight, pulling her out Kagune and showing off a fearsome set of wings that she uses to fight against the investigators, managing to kill one as she tells Hinami to run. At the same time, Kaneki is leaving his shift for the day at Anteiku but ends up turning back for some reason. As he turns, he hears chatter from people coming from the direction the mother and daughter went. He hears them speak about the ghoul fighting investigators, and knowing that trouble is brewing, tries calling Yoshimura as backup. The manager doesn't pick up his phone though, because management never answers when you actually need them. Instead, Kaneki goes to investigate on his own. As he nears, Ryoko is in bad shape. She pushes Hinami away, begging her to run, to live, as the investigators close in on her. Mado pulls a weapon out of his briefcase, a huge whip sword with jagged edges all over it that he calls a quinke. It's revealed that this is made from the kagune of Ryoko's dead husband, and as Kaneki nears, grabbing Hinami to hide her in an alleyway, Mado uses the quinke to kill Ryoko. Kaneki does what he can to hide the sight from Hinami, rushing her back to Anteiku and hoping that they don't follow. Hinami ends up staying at Anteiku as the death of Ryoko sends shockwaves through the entire ghoul community. Tuka is affected heavily, resolving to take revenge on the doves despite Yoshimura telling her that if she does, she's on her own in her mission. The doves, meanwhile, are celebrating their win, with Amon tagging along to lunch with a couple of the investigators while still going over case notes. Eamon gives a more human perspective on things, showing that the reason the doves are so merciless is due to the exposure to ghoul violence they see every single day. At the Commission of Counter Ghoul, or CCG, headquarters, there are dozens of orphaned children, parents torn apart by ghouls who aren't nearly as merciful or thoughtful as those at Anteiku. Seeing the other side of things gives a much more nuanced perspective to the doves, and only reinforces the feelings to come for Eamon. As the trio of agents leave the restaurant, they're attacked by a ghoul wearing a rabbit mask, who proceeds to kill one of them as she takes them by surprise. Amon pulls out a quinke and gives a good fight, but isn't enough to keep up with the rabbit's speed. He's injured, and as things look to be nearing the end for him, is suddenly saved by Mado's arrival. Mado deals a huge blow to the rabbit, injuring her shoulder with his quinke, the same one used to kill Ryoko, and sending her running like a rabbit. As Mado picks up Eamon and calls for backup to pick up their slain comrade, the rabbit comes to a rest on a nearby rooftop, pulling the mask off to reveal Tuka. The next day at work, Kaneki sees that she's injured, and even though she tries to push him away, he helps her with her injuries. Yoshimura sees, and Kaneki ends up standing up for himself, saying he can't bear to see anyone hurt, whether they're human or ghoul. Yoshimura, to his surprise, says that this is exactly what he expected of Kaneki, reiterating that he's the only one who can see both worlds thanks to his unique perspective. Despite Tuka's injuries, Kaneki has a request for her: train him to use his kagune so he doesn't have to see his friends get hurt again. She takes him down below Anteiku, where an old tunnel system that was used to hide ghouls back in the day is situated. There, they practice fighting, though Kaneki is less than great at it. She teaches him how to tap into his kagune, though, noting that it will become stronger as he feels more powerful emotions. She also mentions that there are different kagune types. Hers emphasizes speed and mobility, whereas his is basically a tank in terms of power, giving him high offensive and defensive abilities. She says he may not be as strong as Rize, but with the right training he has the potential to reach her heights in power. The two train for a while before packing up for the day. Anteiku is already closed when they return to the surface, but to their surprise, Uta the mask maker enters, intending to deliver Kaneki's mask. He says he didn't expect to find them there, but while they are, he wants to see how it looks on Kaneki. It's a perfect fit too, with a terrifying grin over the mouth that Kaneki can unzip when he needs to feed. It also covers his human eye, allowing the red of his ghoul eye to stand out and make a fearsome sight set next to the grinning mask. Uta tells him to keep it on him if he ends up going out as a ghoul, especially with the doves still wandering around the 20th ward. Meanwhile, he asks about Hinami, who is still staying in the upstairs rooms of Anteku, though she's mostly just slept since the death of her mother. To Kaneki's surprise, Tuka tells him to meet her the next day while they're both off work. Though he doesn't know why, he shows up to where they're supposed to meet, expecting Tuka to be fashionably late like always. She's not super late, but does show up dressed in a high school uniform with her hair styled differently. She throws another uniform to Kaneki, messing with his hair so he looks different, and leads him to another part of town where Kaneki discovers what they're actually after. The Krabby Patty formula. Nah, that would be a weird crossover. Instead, they arrive at the CCG. The CCG takes anonymous tips about ghouls from the public, and Tuka intends on using this to throw off their scent. Mado and Amon are searching hard for Hinami, though all they have is a description of what she was wearing the day Ryoko was killed, as nobody was able to get a good look at her. The two enter the CCG building, with Tuka instructing Kaneki to just follow along and confirm her story. While they're waiting for someone to come take their statement, Kaneki notices a strange device set up leading further into the building. Tuka explains that it's a new RC detector meant to sense the levels of a special enzyme in the body. She explains that while humans have normal levels of RC cells between 200 and 500 depending, ghouls will often have 10 times that thanks to their unique biology. This thing, like a giant metal detector, is meant to pick up on those and reveal any ghouls that may attempt to sneak into the CCG headquarters. Of course, this sets Kaneki on edge, and for good reason. Finally, a woman comes along to take their tip, and she's far too happy about the thought of destroying any ghouls that the CCG may come across. Like singing songs about it levels of happy. She's talking to the two like they're on some anti-ghoul Sesame Street skit, which is weird to say the least. Tuka gives her a statement, mentioning that she saw the young ghoul that they're looking for down by a river on the other side of the 20th ward, hoping it will throw them off. Just as they're finishing up their statement, Mado walks through the door, eyes crazy as ever. The woman calls him over, mentioning to the two ghouls that he's the lead on the investigation they're giving a statement about. Tuka knows they're running into a problem and makes up an excuse about having to leave and get back to class ASAP. Mado senses something is off with them too, his gut feeling being far too good for just a normal investigator. He insists that they come inside with him so he can ask them a few questions about their statement. Tuka insists that they can't, trying to grab Kaneki and pull him toward the door, but she's too late. Mado grabs the young ghoul hybrid, dragging him closer to the RC detector, intending to use it to reveal that Kaneki is a ghoul if his hunch is right. Kaneki is going through every possibility in his head, wondering what will happen to him if it's revealed that he's a ghoul. Before he knows it though, Mado has dragged him right through the archway of the detector and it remains silent. By some miracle, or by virtue of being a hybrid thanks to organ transplants, Kaneki isn't revealed to all of CCG headquarters, for now at least. Mado is stunned, in disbelief that he was wrong about his gut feeling that is so often right. While he's taken aback, Kaneki uses the distraction to shove his way past, exiting through the RC detector again and joining Tuka at the door to leave. They stumble out, accidentally shoving past Amon as he enters from the opposite way. Seeing the look on his superior officer's face, Amon wonders what's going on, but Mado simply says his hunch was wrong. Though he still believes something was strange about these kids, he concedes that he was wrong in this case. Tuka and Kaneki head back to Anteiku, unsure of what to do and counting their lucky stars that they actually made it out of this alive. They call it a day then and there, resolving to go home and decompress after all that. Tuka is still dealing with her injuries. Meanwhile, Kaneki is still in turmoil over not being able to save Ryoko when she was under attack by the doves. It's something that becomes a driving force for his character, especially when it comes to keeping Hinami alive. Meanwhile, Amon goes out to lunch with the same agent that he had joined a few days before after the memorial for their fallen co-worker. At the same restaurant, the agent has a slight breakdown, talking about how he was always suckered into buying lunch for the other guy, but that he didn't mind because they were friends. Amon, reaching a new level of resolve when it comes to his job, slams down the food he orders, asking the other agent to buy him lunch, and in return he'll make sure that no others die on his watch. A bold proposal, and he intends to keep it, but it's not going to be nearly as easy. Not a bad idea to get free lunches though. The next day shows a few flashbacks of Amon joining the CCG as a young hotshot, fresh from the Anteku Investigator Academy, where he was trained. We see his first day on the job, where he's assigned to Mado as his senior officer. They explain that rookies are often paired with older seasoned officers to ensure they pick up on the experience and skills that can't be taught in the academy. The rest of their unit tells him that Mado is eccentric though. One calls him a quinque freak, saying that Mado has an obsession with ghouls and kagunes, desiring only to kill more so he can make new quinques out of their corpses. Kaneki and Tuka go into work the next day to find that Hinami has disappeared, escaping out of her bedroom window to somewhere they're unsure of. They split up, with Kaneki going to look near where Ryoko died while Tuka goes to search near where Hinami's father was killed weeks ago. Turns out, that's the same place that they gave the fake tip about, and unfortunately for Tuka, it's also where Hinami ended up. She finds the girl crying under a small dock by the river. As she tries to comfort her, the young girl simply says that she wants her parents back to be able to be a happy family again. Though Tuka tries to console her, it's no use, as Mado appears with a promise to reunite her with her parents in the afterlife. He's carrying 2 briefcases this time, and pulls one out to reveal a new quinque made from Ryoko's kagune, which he uses to pin Tuka to a nearby column holding up the dock. Meanwhile, as Kaneki is looking around the other area, he comes across Amon, who gets a call from Mado that he's found the young ghoul they've been looking for. Knowing that time is of the essence, Kaneki throws himself into action to save his newfound friends. He dons his mask, confronting Amon, who pulls out his own quinque to fight. Back at the dock, Mado is getting ready to kill Tuka with the quinques made from Hinami's parents. Right as he's about to strike a killing blow, he's hit directly by a new kagune Hinami's. It's almost a perfect fusion of her parents' kagunes, with the winds of her mother and long, stinging whip of her father, which she uses to sever Mado's hand, making him drop the quinque made from her mom. This only reinforces his resolve though, as he goes insane thinking of the quinque he could make out of her kagune, and begins going on the offensive again with his remaining hand. Kaneki's fight with Amon isn't going well for the young ghoul hybrid, as he still doesn't have a great grasp on fighting techniques. Despite his ability to tap into his kagune, it's also not nearly strong enough to get through Amon's training. Off in the trees, Yomo can be seen observing the battle, though his motivations are unclear. Finally, after being beaten down enough, Kaneki has a flashback to Yoshimura, telling him he's the only one that can understand human emotions and ghoul hunger. He has an idea, giving in to his own hunger in an all-or-nothing attack. Kaneki unzips the cover of his mask, showing his real mouth, and makes a leap at Amon, biting down on the dove's shoulder to attack. Channeling the spirit of the bite of 87, Kaneki prepares to wreck everything in sight. It does exactly as he wants it to, with the bloodlust and hunger taking over his mind, powering up his Kagun to levels that would give Rize a run for her money. It's enough for him to take out Amon, though before he can strike a killing blow, he runs off to stop himself, leaving the injured man on the ground. Kaneki is losing it though, hunger in the driver's seat while he considers finding a few people to eat. Despite how hard he struggles to get it under control, it's not working until Yomo appears. While it seems like he's there to put Kaneki down for losing control, Yomo simply lets Kaneki attack him, taking a direct hit from his Kagune and telling the younger man that everything will be okay. As his Kagune stabs through Yomo, Kaneki comes back to reality, realizing what he's done and retracting his powers. Yomo takes him as Kaneki mentions that Hinami and Tuka are in trouble, with the two going to find their friends and save them. Not that they really need to. As Hinami laments that she only wants to be with her family again, the blood loss from his severed hand starts to affect Mado. He attempts an attack on the young girl only to be cut off by Tuka, who slices one of his legs off right at the shin and makes him collapse in the rising water under the dock. With his last breaths, he laments being killed by a filthy ghoul. Tuka noting that even as he dies, he's still reaching for them, gloves on his hands so as not to dirty them. Yomo, Kaneki, and Yoshimura all appear as Mado dies, though there's no time to clean up the mess before the other doves begin to flock to the scene. Even Eamon manages to drag himself there with help from the others, seeing his mentor dead in the water. He remembers that Mado had a personal reason for becoming a ghoul investigator, and when they have his memorial a few days later, his gloves are laid over his grave along with something else, a wedding ring. While Mado went a little wild in his pursuit of justice, he was doing it out of a good but misguided place, intending to help others so they didn't lose loved ones to ghouls like he did. His death only strengthens Amon's resolve, who swears that he'll exterminate any ghouls who cross his path from here on out. Meanwhile, the Anteiku staff keep Hinami hidden for a few more days. Kaneki has made a hero of himself thanks to his actions against Amon though, words spreading like wildfire through the ghoul clientele at Anteiku. Of course, Enji takes it as another opportunity to reminisce about his days as the mad ape of the 20th ward, but everyone else tells him to can it. Kaneki has earned himself respect amongst the 20th ward ghouls now, and it's only going to grow from here. As things settle down in the wake of Tokyo Ghoul's first major arc, a new villain appears. A woman is left screaming on the streets of the 20th ward, her eyes scooped out of her sockets before she's let loose during the night. The culprit? A ghoul who goes by the name of the Gourmet. Kaneki has gotten a taste for how cruel ghouls can be, but with the encounter with the doves, he now knows that it's a fight for survival every single day. The Gourmet is going to give his newfound perspective a test thanks to just how close Kaneki gets.
いい匂いだ。やはりここは落ち着くね。
Back at Anteiku, the kid is being hailed as a local hero for fighting off a dove on his own, with everyone congratulating him and thanking him for keeping Hinami safe. Kaneki doesn't really think much of it though, just working like usual as he tries to find a sense of balance in his life. That normalcy gets upended quickly though, because one day a new customer walks into Anteiku, and every ghoul there makes sure to mention what a pain in the ass this guy is. Shutsukiyama, otherwise known as the Gourmet, makes his appearance known in Anteiku, mentioning that he wanted to meet this new ghoul everyone's been talking about. Kaneki is a little flustered by the flamboyant man's presence, and everyone else tells Shu to leave him alone as he makes a small scene at the cafe. Before long, after getting a good glimpse at the young boy, he leaves, lamenting that everyone in there is more primitive and doesn't have the refined tastes that he has. Despite his woes about Anteiku though, he's not done with Kaneki. No, he still has plenty of creeping on the poor kid to do. The next day, Kaneki is reading a book on martial arts while drinking a coffee, sitting at a table outside his small college building, when Shu approaches him again. He's not a student there, of course, but is stalking Kaneki. He begins to go on about how no other ghouls have shared his love for books since Rize was alive, leading Kaneki to question him even more. According to Shu, he and Rize were good friends when she was alive, bonding over their appreciation of literature, including books written by Kaneki's favorite author. Turns out they had different tastes though, and Shu blames Rize's overexcited appetite for her early death. While Kaneki tries to question him more about Rize, Shu strings him along, inviting him to go to a cafe bookstore nearby so they can get to know each other more. Kaneki agrees and they make plans to go later in the week. After Anteiku closes at the end of the day, Kaneki meets up with Tuka to train in the old abandoned tunnels below. They're getting relatively better at fighting, though Kaneki still has a ways to go before he's ready for any big battles. Suddenly, Yomo shows up, telling them both to come at him at the same time. It's over in seconds, and even their combined strength isn't enough to take down the veteran ghoul. Yomo grew up scrapping to survive in one of the more brutal wards, so it's not too surprising. After they finish, Yomo asks Kaneki to go with him across town to visit a couple of friends. They arrive at the Helter Skelter bar to find Uta and a woman named Itori, both old friends of Yomo from his days living in the 4th ward. Itori runs the bar, brokering information amongst the ghoul underworld for her own gain. She's also super flirty with Kaneki, though he seems to be getting that from everyone lately. Kaneki learns a little of Yomo's history, finding out that he and Uta used to fight a lot when they were both young hotshots in the 4th Ward, but that's the least surprising thing. From Itori, Kaneki gets wind that Rize's death wasn't an accident, and someone set up those steel beams to fall on her on purpose. She won't tell him anymore though, saying that she needs information in return from him. When asked what he could possibly give, Itori mentions that there's a ghoul restaurant in the 20th Ward that's only accessible by invite. She tells him that he could possibly get in close with the Gourmet to find a way in, but she wants information on what goes down in there. In addition, he learns that he's special in the ghoul world. One-eyed ghouls like him, who only have one of their eyeballs turn red, are a major rarity.
すごい初めて見た赤眼のグール
Usually, they're only achieved by ghouls and humans interbreeding, which is next to impossible due to the physiological differences. As such, one-eyed ghouls are referred to as kings or harbingers of doom, depending on their goals. Kaneki leaves the bar, leaving Yomo to reminisce with his friends, but stops just a couple of blocks away when he hears someone being beaten in a nearby alleyway. To his surprise, it's Nishio, still injured from their fight where Kaneki first released his Kagune. 3 ghouls are beating the crap out of him, talking about how he's not so tough now and that they'll make him pay. He's about on the brink of death too, with the ghouls doing their best mafia impression, getting ready to break him to pieces. Kaneki, despite their past, saves him by revealing the one red eye he has, causing them to flee. Nishio is in rough shape, but Kaneki picks him up and carries him back to his home, discovering the place in disarray. He hasn't been able to hunt for any real food since becoming injured, and just coffee isn't going to nourish him enough to heal the wound, so he's been getting by, stomach wound killing him in an agonizingly slow death. To Kaneki's surprise though, a woman shows up, telling him to leave Nishio alone and leave right then and there. He learns that this is Kimi, Nishio's girlfriend, who also turns out to be a human. He hasn't eaten her for some reason, and though she thanks him for rescuing Nishio, she still tells him that he needs to leave right away. Kaneki gets out, heading back home for the day, while wondering how someone like Nishio ends up with a human girlfriend. Meanwhile, Kaneki can't even read obvious flirting signals from half the people around him. While working at Anteiku the next day, he tries to bring food upstairs to Hinami, but is surprised to find her gone. When he asks, Yoshimura says that the young girl has moved in with Tuka, desiring to get out of Anteiku and try to live a somewhat normal life. Not that there's any normal life for a ghoul, especially after the chaos of the past few weeks. Still, Kaneki wants to go visit Hinami and make sure she's settling in well, so he goes to Tuka with her after they get off work that evening. Tuka is having her own drama outside of Anteiku right now as well. Her best friend in school, Yoriko, desperately wants to be better friends with her. Yoriko is also trying to become a professional chef, and that means she's always bringing new food around. She insists that Tuka try it, saying that she rarely ever sees her eat, so as not to hurt her friend's feelings, Tuka indulges her, taking bites of whatever she brings for lunch that day. Nice thing to do for a friend, sure, but Tuka is basically nerfing her powers with every bite. As Kaneki and Hinami are catching up at Tuka's apartment, Yoriko stops by to drop off some stew that she made for her friend. Upon seeing Kaneki's shoes outside though, she believes that Tuka has a boyfriend she hasn't told anyone about. She's embarrassed, insisting that Tuka take the stew and share it with Kaneki before running off in a fluster. Meanwhile, Tuka is more embarrassed. Someone thinks she's dating Kaneki. Kaneki, though he understands what it means to have friends you would do anything for, can't fathom how Tuka manages to down the stew, though he takes a couple of bites as well in solidarity. Unfortunately, eating human food isn't great for ghouls, and Tuka is insistent that she not throw any of it up so as not to insult her friend's cooking. It's respectable, if not a little stupid, but she manages to keep everything down. Kaneki finally leaves later in the evening, going to prepare for his day with Shu that's just around the corner. Before that though, we get a glimpse at what Hyde has been up to. Bad news for Kaneki, but Hyde is a pretty brilliant guy, so brilliant that he started putting things together after hearing news of the doves and increased ghoul activity in the 20th Ward. Though he doesn't quite suspect Kaneki is a ghoul yet, he does have a hunch, and that's something that will come back to bite all of them later. The next day, Kaneki meets up with Shu at a small bookstore and cafe that Shu reveals is a frequent hangout of Kaneki's favorite author. They chat for a while, sharing coffee and discussing everything from books to Rize. Eventually, Shu accidentally shatters a glass, causing Kaneki to get cut. He offers his own handkerchief for him to wipe up the blood. insisting it's fine. Then the freak goes to the bathroom and takes a big ol' whiff of the bloody rag, tasting it and revealing his true intentions. He wants to eat Kaneki. See, Shu knows that he's a ghoul, and though he doesn't know the whole situation about having Rize's organs, he does know that there's something different that makes Kaneki more human. After their cafe outing, Shu tells Kaneki that he knows about an exclusive restaurant that he would love to take him to. Knowing that this is what Itori asked him to find out more about, Kaneki agrees, and the two head off to a seedier part of the 20th ward. Before they get to the restaurant though, have you liked this video yet? Please subscribe and ring the bell so we can keep bringing you awesome anime content like Tokyo Ghoul. Once they arrive, Kaneki separates from Shu, being told that the restaurant has a standard of cleanliness? Really, it just seems like Kaneki is stupidly naive for the next couple of chapters. They take him to a separate room, making him shower, then providing a nicer suit for him to wear. When he's done, the staff lead him into a small room where an older man and young woman are both waiting. The man is a food critic invited by a friend of his, while the woman was brought there by her fiancé. Both were given the same treatment as Kaneki, and the food critic is raving about how intriguing it all is. Seems pretentious, but okay. Suddenly, the doors open and staff wheels in a cart with fresh coffee for everyone to drink, though Kaneki abstains. Before long, staff arrive to lead them to a dining area, mentioning that they'll be joining up with the others there. Kaneki notices along the way that the windows are all boarded up, and though he has a bad feeling in his gut, brushes it off as being done for the safety of the other ghouls. Once they reach their destination, they all notice that there's nowhere to sit, no table, and nobody else in sight. Suddenly, the ceiling opens up, revealing dozens of ghouls watching from a balcony up top, Shu standing front and center with them. As the treachery is revealed, the two humans are taken aback, with the critic under the belief that he's in some weird dinner theater while the woman is nonplussed. Kaneki meanwhile realizes that he's in deep crap and needs to get out ASAP. Before they can do anything though, a massive human butcher steps out of the shadows, grabbing the critic and ripping his arm clean from his torso. Everything suddenly becomes very real for Kaneki and the girl, who realizes that her fiancé is a ghoul who's been fattening her up ever since they met just to feed on her. She tries to run, only to be caught by the butcher who slices her open with a hacksaw. He then sets his sights on Kaneki as the other ghouls cheer him on, noting that he's a pet of one of their own patrons. What they didn't realize is that a regular hacksaw isn't going to cut it when trying to take down Kaneki. His ghoul physique can't be hurt, and it gives him the opening he needs to attack. Using some of his newfound martial arts abilities, Kaneki breaks the butcher's arm, causing him to shriek in pain. When Shu realizes his mistake, he tosses down a familiar-looking style of briefcase to the butcher, telling him to use this instead. He pulls out a massive saw-like quinquet, immediately bringing it down where Kaneki was standing only seconds before. Things are looking bad, because Kaneki hasn't eaten well lately, so his kaguni is useless. As he evades the butcher over and over again, he desperately tries to look for a way out. Unfortunately, he's outnumbered at every direction, with hordes of hungry high-class ghouls waiting to take a bite of him. Things are tense as Kaneki tries to avoid getting hit by the quinquet, and he starts to reason himself through his only options: die or feed. He finally decides to go on the offensive, taking a massive bite out of the butcher before activating his kagoon with the newfound strength he gets from feeding. It tears through the human in moments, leaving him to bleed out on the floor. Kaneki's eye has changed, giving everyone a direct look at one of the mythical one-eyed ghouls, as they all stare in awe. Many of them are desperate to get a bite of him, while others are almost in fear. Before Kaneki can make a move though, Shu jumps down from the balcony, finishing off the butcher with a massive drill-like kagune. Shu begs Kaneki to just brush off what happened there and lets him go home peacefully, promising the others a meal at his expense. Kaneki just goes home almost like nothing happened, keeping the information close as he can trade it with Itori for more information on Rize. The next day though, Shu makes another move that brings in an innocent bystander. Kaneki is at Anteiku the next evening, closing up shop alongside Tuka when Nishiki stumbles in, still holding at his wound. He reveals a note that was left to give to Kaneki, telling him that he's kidnapped Kimi and wants Kaneki to find him. Of course, Nishio isn't going to let them go rescue his girlfriend on their own, so he sets out with Tuka and Kaneki to rescue her. Eventually, they find Shu at an abandoned church in the 20th ward holding Kimi hostage. He reveals his master plan. He wants to feed on Kaneki while Kaneki feeds on Kimi. Look, the guy is a freak, no denying that. Of course, Nishio isn't cool with that, and neither are the others, though Nishio can't put up much of a fight in his state, taking a massive hit and getting laid out almost instantly. Hard to believe Kaneki was getting his ass beat by this guy just 40 chapters ago. Tuka is up next, and she fares a lot better against Shu than Nishio. Her Kagune, a massive set of wings, helps her speed against his more power-based attacks, giving her a slight edge. Even then though, it's not nearly enough. Unfortunately for Tuka, she's been nerfing her own fighting ability by eating the human food Yoriko keeps bringing her. Weakened, Tuka gets knocked aside eventually, leading to Kaneki stepping in. Before he gets far though, we see a flashback from Nishio about his backstory. Turns out, he grew up a homeless ghoul alongside his older sister. Their parents were killed by other ghouls when Nishio was just a child, so his sister had to get a job to provide for them. As she works, she pays for Nishio to go to school, and he ends up having a pretty good mind for medicine. She burns through jobs like crazy though, constantly getting fired, until her one lucky break, where she ends up falling in love with her manager. Eventually, he proposes to her, and she feels like it's safe enough to tell him what she really is. It doesn't work out though. She tells her manager that she's a ghoul, only for him to report her and Nishio to the doves. Nishio ends up killing him in revenge after the doves take out his sister, before using a family register left behind by their parents to assume a new identity as a human, blending in and starting college with the money she left for him. Eventually, he meets Kimi. Though he isn't planning on getting romantically involved, he asks her out on a date to help himself blend in. Over the weeks and months, he starts to grow fond of her, actually finding her endearing after so long. Despite constantly telling himself he was going to eat her eventually, he never does, simply putting it off and saying it's because there's easier prey. After his beating from Kaneki, Nishio retreats to his home across town instead of his dorm room to recover. He contemplates calling Kimi, using her to feed on and heal himself, but grapples with his actual feelings for her. One night after he ignores her calls and refuses to see her yet again, she makes her way over. Nishio is hurting bad and his ghoul instincts take over, making a leap and biting her on the shoulder. To his surprise, she offers herself up, only telling him that she'll die if it means he can live safely. Nishio stops biting her, refusing to take even one more taste of her blood. Their trust grows, with Kimi uncaring of what Nishio really is. Not that it helps him right now, as he refuses to eat her to heal his wounds, and it's only getting worse. Kimi is considering murdering someone for him before she's kidnapped, but Nishio was discouraging that as best as he could. Back to the battle at hand, Kaneki is going toe-to-toe with Shu with his full Kagune. Eventually his powers start to falter, but he's done enough that Tuka and Nishio can both jump into the fight and help him finish off Shu. With the Gourmet bleeding to death on floor, they find themselves with a new problem. Kimi sees Tuka and Kaneki in full, faces uncovered by masks. Tuka, realizing that a human knowing her identity is a massive threat, tries to kill her. Kaneki fends her off briefly, but he's too weakened by the fight and his lack of food. Tuka holds Kimi for the death blow, Kagune out in full wingspan, and as Kimi looks on at her executioner, she says the most unexpected thing. She calls Tuka's Kagune beautiful, completely throwing her off of her killing rhythm. Tuka tosses Kimi to the side, escaping through a nearby window. She's moping on a rooftop later, mentioning that her Kagune is hideous as Kaneki helps Nishio and Kimi get to safety. The Gourmet is left to bleed to death in the church, though nobody goes back to check if he's really dead. Oh, and Yomo is doing his weird thing, watching everyone from a distance the entire time. Real helpful of you to just stand there, dude. Things quiet down over the next few days, though there's a new threat in town that's taking out some lower-level ghouls in the 20th ward. It's a new dove named Juzo, who looks like a kid with stitches all over his skin. He's brutal and crazy enough to make Inspector Mado look like Mr. Rogers, so things are going to get difficult for the ghoul life in the 20th. He ends up tearing through 3 ghouls during his introduction, being especially cruel to them. Back at Dove headquarters, Eamon is considering his next move when Inspector Shinohara enters, saying he's been sent alongside his apprentice Juzo to investigate a new ghoul organization popping up. He introduces Juzo to Amon, who is creeped out by the kid's bloodthirsty demeanor. He doesn't have much time to think on it though, because other manners need attending to. Like how Amon needs a new Quinque for going up against ghouls. They also find out that a lead investigator, Marud, is planning something big with the ghouls of the 13th ward. Back at the Anteiku side of things, Kaneki gives his information to Itori, filling her in on the ghoul restaurant and what that entails. She in turn tells him more about Rize, notably that Rize wasn't her real name. She says Rize came from the 13th Ward and that he would need to look further into events there, though things in the 13th Ward are basically hell on earth now. Turns out, the ghouls of the 13th Ward have been taken over by an organization called Aogiri Tree. This ghoul org, led by someone known as the One-Eyed King, have systematically murdered every dove in the 13th Ward and are trying to branch out into the others. Kaneki thanks Itori for the info, heading back to Anteku for work. Upon arriving there, it's revealed that Nishio has taken a job at Anteiku as well, though his cold attitude isn't meshing well with everyone else. Kaneki is barely there for 10 minutes when some strange figures come in. Everyone prepares themselves for chaos when the hooded figure in charge asks if anyone knows where Rize is. They try to say no, but the man suddenly starts sniffing Kaneki, saying he smells Rize. He's under the assumption that Kaneki must be Rize's new boyfriend, and he's definitely not acting normal about it. Eventually, it irritates him, making him take a swing at Kaneki, who easily dispatches him in one hit. They take him to the upstairs room as the men with him begin to profusely apologize. They explain his name is Banjo, and until recently, he was their leader in the 13th Ward. He didn't mean any harm, he's just hot-headed and kind of an idiot, unfortunately. Kaneki tells them it's okay and starts asking them how they know Rize. They explain that Banjo was once the second in command to Rize in the 13th Ward until she decided to run off to the 20th. Since things have gotten bad back home, with Aogiri Tree moving in and killing any ghouls that don't agree, they came to find Rize, hoping she could return some sense of stability. Right around this time, Banjo wakes up and they have to break the bad news to him that Rize is dead. He apologizes to Kaneki, telling him that he's sorry for causing trouble. Banjo really is a good guy, he's just an idiot most of the time. He thanks them for their help though, and tells Kaneki that he needs to be careful of those back in the 13th Ward. That's when all hell breaks loose. The glass breaks in the upstairs room, ghouls jumping through to start a beatdown on Banjo. Their leader suddenly appears, a kid with long, messy hair that oddly resembles one of their own. The kid tells Banjo that his mission was to bring back Rize or anyone that smelled like her, and now he's in trouble for spilling their secrets. Then he turns to Tuka, who has her kagune out and ready to fight, only to say, "Hello, sister." He then instructs Kaneki to come with them or he'll kill everyone there, leading to Kaneki cooperating out of concern for everyone there. Before he knows it, he's being knocked out and whisked off to the 13th Ward. Once there, he gets a full view of how Aogiri Tree operates. There are 3 main officers with hundreds of ghouls under each of their command. Ayato, Tuatka's brother. Yamori, a ghoul referred to as Jason thanks to his brutal tactics and hockey mask, and the Bin brothers, 2 especially violent ghouls. Kaneki sees one of the leaders above them, Tatara, who approaches him and immediately stabs him right through the stomach. Tatara mentions that Rize is definitely dead, confirming Kaneki has her kagune. He then asks Kaneki if he knows that the doctor who did his transplant is on the run, suddenly disappearing yesterday as someone came after him. Pieces begin to fall into place before Tatara confirms that Kaneki isn't a real one-eyed ghoul and that their one-eyed king is the only one around. He leaves, telling them to put Kaneki to work. Kaneki, Banjo, his followers, and a few others are all captive, made to work as slaves for Aogiri Tree while they're fed scraps to survive off of. Banjo ends up inviting Kaneki one night to a rally of resistance fighters. They ask for his help, making a plan to sneak out when the leaders are out of headquarters and make a run for it. Kaneki agrees and they wait until Yamori and Ayato's leave schedules overlap, leaving only the Bin brothers in charge to contend with. The night finally comes and the group sneaks out, making a desperate break for Hit when they hear one of the Bin brothers is sleeping while the other is supposed to be on the other side of the compound. Their information doesn't get them far though. A random Aogiri Tree member is waiting around the perimeter of the building and sounds the alarm when he sees the group trying to leave. The Bin brothers jump in, with only Banjo and Kaneki able to fight back. They put up one hell of a fight with the little power they have, but eventually the battle is cut short right as Kaneki gains an upper hand on one Bin brother. A scream comes from further down the path, revealing that the entire group of refugees has been captured by Yamori, who was only faking going out so he could fool them. He tells Kaneki that he's going to kill every single one of them, but if Kaneki comes with him voluntarily, he'll let everyone go. They have a tense standoff before Kaneki finally agrees, with Yamori taking him away towards his new living arrangement. Behind Kaneki's back though, he tells the Bin brothers to bring the refugees back, going back on his word. Kaneki is led to a patterned room where he's sat in a chair, and Yamori begins his torture. He plans on tearing Kaneki apart to psychologically break him, and wow, it's a rough time. This guy is named after Jason Voorhees, but even the masked killer would think Yamori is going too far. Cutting off toes, slicing open limbs, bringing Kaneki to the edge of death until his hair turns white from the stress, Yamori has no bounds on his cruelty. While Kaneki is undergoing his torture, the crew back at Anteiku begin to meet up and plan their move. Thanks to Itori having ears all over the place, they soon learn about the Dove's plan to launch a raid on Aogiri Tree headquarters in the coming days. Everyone begins preparation, with Yoshimura asking Tuka if she and Nishio are prepared to risk everything for Kaneki, noting that there may not be any going back for them if they go through with the rescue. Meanwhile though, Kaneki's torture is making him lose his shit in some of the worst ways possible. He's having a Shinji Ikari level of breakdown as Yamori just keeps up with the torture, calling his helper Nico over any time he gets too close to killing Kaneki. When he calls Nico over though, it's only to ram a hand right through his gut, which doesn't seem like the best relationship dynamic. Still, it keeps Yamori from outright killing Kaneki, and that's something that he's really going to regret later. Eventually, the physical torture just isn't cutting it for Yamori. He brings in a female ghoul and her young son, two of the group that he promised Kaneki he would let go free if he just cooperated, and tells Kaneki he needs to kill the woman. If he doesn't, Yamori is going to kill them both, then get right back into torture mode. Naturally, the good-natured Kaneki just can't bring himself to do it. He struggles, telling Yamori that he's going too far, that he'll never forgive him, and that he's going to kill him for going back on his word. Even Nico is telling Yamori that he's being a little too much, and that's saying a lot considering Nico has been enabling the guy from the start. Still, Kaneki's flailing and refusal to kill them just makes Yamori follow up on his promise, killing both mother and child as they beg for help right in front of the poor kid. Yamori leaves then, saying he'll come back later and see how Kaneki is taking it while just laughing it off like it was some harmless prank. Kaneki himself is crashing out hard, and eventually he starts to hallucinate Rize there talking to him. It's nice they finally get someone on one time to learn more about each other a few months after their first date was ruined though, right? Not that it's on any better terms. Still, Rize here shows a bit more compassion to Kaneki, probably because he's imagining her, but still, it's nice to see another side of the ghoul known as the binge eater. Turns out our little Kaneki has led quite the terrible life, yet he remains optimistic and nice despite all of that. When he was just 4 years old, his father died. Then, his mother took on multiple jobs to provide for them, always making sure Kaneki was fed and housed despite their poor status. In addition to that though, she was taking care of her sister's family because her sister was constantly there asking for money, even when Kaneki's mom was working herself into exhaustion. The woman was a damn saint though, and despite how awful her sister could be, was constantly giving her money so that her little family could get by as well. But of course, you can only work yourself so hard before you become a cautionary tale. And when Kaneki was barely a teenager, his mother died from overwork, becoming too ill to get up at first before her heart gave out. Then, Kaneki got into his own version of Cinderella, being adopted by his aunt who revealed just how awful she was. Seriously, this woman was the worst, constantly treating Kaneki like crap and blaming him for making her own child look stupid thanks to his good grades. As is tradition for anime protagonists going through a major mental breakdown, Kaneki starts to undergo a major change. His hair has already turned totally white from the stress, but he's starting to realize that if he's going to bridge the gap between ghoul and human, he has to be just as ruthless as the worst parts of both races. Back at Anteiku, the group there has made their decision. They're about to crash the hell out of this Aogiri tree party. Everyone gets new masks from Uta to wear so they can blend in with the Aogiri ghouls. Of course, half of them are too cool to wear them, including Yomo and Mr. Yoshimura, who wear their own masks. They still have another surprise in store though, because an unexpected guest shows up to help rescue Kaneki Shu the Gourmet. Turns out, he survived his fight with Kaneki and company by eating himself. Even more concerning, he says that he's delicious. I wish I was making this up, but the guy is just that weird. Either way though, he's on board for helping Kaneki and joins up with the Anteiku staff, Uta, Itori, and little Hinami to set out and rescue their newfound friend. The doves start making their move right before sunset, surrounding the Aogiri tree compound, which consists of 6 moderately sized towers. The fighting is a standstill from the start though, with Marud, the dove in charge, being more of a bureaucrat than a fighter. Amon is speaking with Shinohara about the situation as they dodge pot shots from a particularly adept ghoul sniper up in the nearby building when things take a turn. Nobody can get past the ghoul that's sniping at them, but Juzo, being the batshit insane kid that he is, finds a way to take him out. See, Marud is very proud of his fancy motorcycle that he drives all over the place, even to this high-stakes ghoul raid on Aogiri. Doesn't really seem like a responsible vehicle owner, but it turns out to be just what they need. Juzo sees the motorcycle, instructing Marud and his subordinates to move it or lose it, as the raid leader slowly realizes what's happening. Before he can stop the kid though, Juzo drives the motorcycle straight through the gates of the Aogiri compound, taking it over an embankment for a jump that would make Evel Knievel crap his pants in fear. The crazy thing is that the jump actually works. Juzo is right on the mark, riding the motorcycle all the way to in front of the sniper's face, where he uses his small knife Quinke to shred the guy into pieces. It's enough for the doves to get a morale boost, and they all jump into action, running off to fight against the Aogiri tree members hiding building by building. Amon, entrusted with a new Quinke from Mado's last will, leads his own little brigade in further. Anteiku sees this as their chance to launch their own attack from the opposite side of the compound. One group, consisting of Yomo, Tuka, Nishio, Uta, and Shu, go on the hunt for Kaneki. Meanwhile, Yoshimura, Hinami, and Itori all stay back to run recon and keep an eye on things across the compound. Turns out, Itori is pretty good at sensing where people are, and Hinami has a knack for it too that she's slowly picking up on. Something to do with RC cells, though it's never quite made clear. One thing that is clear, we need you to like and subscribe our videos so we can keep making them. We love bringing the best anime and manga content possible, but only you can make that keep happening. Drop a follow and stay tuned for more. Naturally, they don't get far before other ghouls start to attack them. Of course, these other ghouls stand no chance against our group of hardened fighters. Okay, it's mostly just Yomo, but still, the Aogiri tree cannon fodder gets the crap beaten out of them within moments. Over in Yamori's torture dungeon Wonderland, things are about to turn on totally upside down. Yamori, instead of defending the Aogiri base as he probably should be doing, is more focused on doing a little more torture on Kaneki, until Kaneki breaks free thanks to his newfound psychological trauma, reinforcing his powers and putting him more in line with who Rize was. In his psychological breakdown, Kaneki eats Rize, fully accepting who he is as a ghoul and abandoning the mentality he got from his mom about being hurt instead of hurting others. Instead, his new outlook becomes kill or be killed, and he decides to not let anyone threaten himself or his friends again. His Kagune gets a major boost, the huge arms of it becoming even more distinct and hardened, able to cut through anything. He breaks out of the chains that Yamori had on him, starting a fight with the 13th Ward's Jason, becoming HSI's own personal Freddy Krueger-style nightmare. Their fight goes hard for a while too. Then Jason reveals he has another ace up his sleeve. He's a ghoul cannibal, and ghoul cannibals get a major metamorphosis to their Kagune thanks to ingesting flesh with more RC cells. He goes in hard on Kaneki, his Kagune becoming a full-body armor for himself as they fight, and things start to look a little rough for the one-eyed ghoul before he turns the tables yet again. If you can't beat him, join him, right? Kaneki takes a massive bite out of Yamori, tearing into his Kagune with sharp teeth and devouring him for sustenance, reinforcing his own Kagune in the process. Yamori starts begging for Kaneki to spare him, realizing the sheer strength hiding in the ghoul hybrid that he can't match. Instead of showing any mercy though, Kaneki extends the same treatment to Yamori that he was shown, breaking off toes and fingers, tearing him apart piece by piece, psychologically breaking down Jason until he's begging for mercy and fighting off the ghosts of all those he's killed in the past. It's one hell of a character arc to go from innocent, nice Kaneki, who could barely stomach the look of blood, to be the one inflicting all this pain, but he's finally becoming more in touch with his ghoul side. Much to Yamori's dismay, of course. Eventually, Kaneki decides that he's broken the ghoul torturer down enough, deciding to finish things once and for all. Not by killing him though. No, Kaneki has learned that he can make life a much worse hell for Yamori than what was done for him. He tears out the kakujo, organs in a ghoul used to facilitate their RC cells and form their kagune, devouring them as his own and leaving Yamori powerless to fight back against anyone that comes for him. It's one cold way to end a battle. Up in another part of the compound, Dove Special Investigators Shinohara and Kuroiwa end up coming up against an infamous ghoul that has a long history with the Dove's the One-Eyed Owl. This ghoul, named for his one red eye and the way his kagune looks like feathers covering him from the shoulders down, is known well throughout the CCG as one of the most deadly around. He was one of the infamous ghouls taken down during his last appearance by Shinohara, Kuroiwa, a young Mado, and Special Investigator Arima back in the day over a decade ago. They were on the hunt for him after the One-Eyed Owl apparently went on a slaughtering spree of investigators that left the CCG in shambles. Of course, they've come with new preparations this time, including 2 experimental quinkes that give them near full body armor and new weapons. Shinohara and Kuroiwa tell the other investigators to either move ahead or back them up, but to do whatever they're going to from a distance as the quinkes are still in the uncontrollable power phase of development. Meanwhile, after having the legendary One-Eyed Owl built up throughout the story, there's finally a reveal as to his identity, none other than Mr. Yoshimura, the mild-mannered manager of Anteiku himself. While Yoshimura distracts the special investigators, Amon and his troops continue on, coming up against the Bin brothers and getting into a heated battle. Many of the lower-rank investigators are taken out with ease, but finally Eamon makes his move and reveals the true power of his new quinke. It looks like a giant sword from a JRPG, but the secret is that it's actually 2 giant JRPG swords. Cloudstrife is somewhere crying in a corner as Eamon cuts down both Bin brothers with ease, with a flashback to Mado's will, noting that only he would be strong enough to use it effectively. Definitely helps that Eamon is built like a semi-truck that hauls piles of bricks for fun. In another room of one of the towers, way down near the ground level, the Anteku group, consisting of Yomo and Tuka, comes under attack by Tuka's brother Ayato. He goes all in, taking out his sister in a ruthless move and knocking her from the fight before turning to take on Yomo. Though the raven-masked ghoul is able to put up one hell of a fight, it's still not quite enough when going up against the young Aogiri tree lieutenant, especially considering Ayato's been eating more than enough human flesh to keep his quinke strong. Yomo is knocked down, leading Shu to try and fight back briefly before being knocked out as well. Tuka tries to make her comeback, doing her best version of "I didn't hear no bell" when Ayato tries to strike a finishing blow, leaping at her with his kagune in full bloom, only for Kaneki to come in and deflect it like the champ he is. Ayato is surprised, but Kaneki ends up hitting him so hard that he busts straight through the ceiling of the building they're in. Multiple times actually. He gets hit through the damn roof so hard he ends up on the roof outside of the building, with Kaneki telling him that he felt he would have more of a fair fight out in the open where Ayato could really use his wings. If that doesn't ooze badassery, then what does? His fight with Ayato is more of a one-sided beatdown despite giving his enemy a home field advantage. Seriously, this guy gets jobbed hard. Kaneki realizes that killing Ayato will make Tuka upset though, and says that instead of killing him, he's just going to go halfway. How do you halfway kill a ghoul though? According to Kaneki, it's by systematically breaking half of the bones in Ayato's body, which he does while counting them all out loud and explaining to Ayato every single step of the way what he's doing. Tuka doesn't see it, thankfully, but she also doesn't hear Kaneki telling Ayato that he saw him subconsciously protect his sister even after all this time. Turns out, there may be some hope for that relationship yet, assuming Ayato can crawl out of here after the doves sweep the place in the following hours. After a few minutes, Kaneki has successfully broken half of every single bone in his body, starting from the bottom and working his way up one side through toes, fingers, legs, and arms. He eventually reunites with the other Anteiku ghouls, and they all begin to make their escape from the Aogiri tree compound. On the lower level of another tower, the fight between Shinohara and Kuroiwa versus the owl is starting to wear them down. Turns out, the owl has more than one kagune, and every single one of them is kicking ass. Yet, the investigators start to notice something. Despite the major ass-kicking they're receiving, none of them have died. The owl even mentions that he doesn't want to kill, and that killing would mean losing the battle for him. The investigators push their experimental quinkes even further still though, doing what they can to try and take the owl down. There's a brief flashback to the previous battle with him as well, and they notice that nobody died during the owl takedown operation then either. As Shinohara begins to black out from the stress of the quinque, he starts to remember that the owl who killed all the other investigators was larger than this one and much more violent, leaving a whole new thread of mystery to uncover. The owl gets a signal that Kaneki has been rescued and dips out faster than Sasuke does, leaving his wife and child. The investigators, still conscious, have no explanation for it, but count themselves as lucky that they survived. Down below, Eamon is running between buildings trying to catch any stray ghouls that may be making an escape. When he looks up to the rooftop of a nearby building and sees Kaneki, he freezes, the two of them locking eyes for a moment and wondering what the other is doing before Kaneki disappears again. Meanwhile, Juzo is up in one of the other towers, dozens of eviscerated bodies surrounding him as he kills every ghoul in sight. The little psychopath is just getting started, and it's only going to enhance his bloodlust from here. With all of this, the raid on Aogiri Tree is nearly over. Marud calls into headquarters, reaching Inspector Arima and starting to gloat about his victory, thinking it will make him get a promotion. Except there's a reason the Aogiri Tree raid went off so smoothly for the doves. Turns out, much of Aogiri's forces were taken to the 23rd Ward earlier in the evening, almost switching places with all the dove forces that went to the 13th for the raid. With the doves gone, the Aogiri ghouls coordinated a raid of their own on a ghoul prison in the 23rd, freeing dozens of dangerous ghouls that had been locked up. Some were experimented on, some were being kept for quinque research, but almost all of them were really pissed off and ready to slaughter any humans they found once they got out. Arima tells Marud to send any spare bodies he has over to the 23rd to help him get everything under control, and Marud is only able to stammer an affirmative after realizing the true cost his pet project has had on Tokyo. Meanwhile, before they make their full getaway, the Anteku group makes sure to rescue any of the prisoners and slaves that Aogiri was holding in their hideout, including Banjo. Though Kaneki has to tell Banjo that he wasn't able to save the mother and child, Banjo still says that he knows Kaneki did what he could. They return to Anteku to take stock of the situation, with everyone in much higher spirits than they were before everything went to hell just a couple of weeks ago. As the Aogiri compound continues to fall, Nico is shown running off into the night, being picked up by some other ghoul who chastises him for falling for Yamori. He says that it was a simple fling, but that he's always been a clown at heart, donning a clown mask just like the other ghoul he meets up with and slinking off into the shadows. The clowns, while still mysterious, have been shown in the background as a more rogue group of ghouls, and somehow Itori and Uta have ties to them thanks to their past in the 4th Ward. Once back at Anteiku, everyone expects things to just go back to normal, but Kaneki has another bombshell to drop on everyone. He's leaving. Everything he learned about the situation with Rize, his own ghoulification, and the Aogiri tree has convinced him that he has a greater part to play in all this. For the safety of everyone at Anteiku, he announces that he'll be leaving. Tuka is surprised, Yomo much less so. The real surprise here though is that Kaneki gains some new followers in the form of Banjo, who says that he always followed Rize and will continue to follow Kaneki in her place. Kaneki accepts, but tells him that what they get into next isn't going to be easy. Banjo still says he'll follow though, and becomes a ride or die for Ken Kaneki. To Kaneki's surprise though, Banjo isn't the only one to step up to follow him. While Banjo promises to be his shield, Shu steps forward requesting to become Kaneki's sword in his crusade against the doves and Aogiri tree. Kaneki accepts him, though gives him a warning that shakes Shu to the core. If he tries any of his bullshit again, Kaneki won't hesitate to kill and devour him without a second thought. It definitely shows the contrast between sweet, innocent Kaneki from before the Aogiri tree and the no-holds-barred monster that stands in front of them now. Before he leaves, he mentions to Tuka that she should keep going to school, telling her that she'll do great in college. He also tells her to watch after Hinami, making sure that she grows up right and keeps herself busy. With that, he takes off, leaving Anteiku and his old life behind him in the shadows. There's a ceremony for some of the fallen from the Aogiri tree raid while the fallout is recapped, with dozens of ghouls escaping containment across the 23rd Ward and filtering out into the surrounding surrounding areas. The upper leaders of Aogiri are still on the loose as well, with nobody able to keep a bead on them for the time being as Tatara and the others evade custody. Still, the ceremony ends in some good notes as Amon and Juzo are both promoted, with Amon now holding the rank of special investigator. Shinohara tells him that he'll be introducing him to his new partner soon, but that he can't tell him who it is quite yet for reasons. After the ceremony, Amon goes to visit Mado's grave, telling his former superior about everything that's happened. It's a bittersweet moment when he admits that he hopes he's made Mado proud, only to be interrupted by a newcomer at the grave, Mado's daughter, Akira. Turns out, Mado not only has a daughter, but she's also Amon's new partner and subordinate with the Doves. While the investigators have been recovering, Kaneki's group has been making moves. The investigators note that they've had several new developments with the Gourmet case, with attacks happening in 3 different districts, though the Gourmet has been avoiding his usual feeding grounds. Everyone else thinks it's because he's afraid of something in the 20th ward, but Akira makes a note that it's likely because there's a target he's after there instead. They decide to follow up on it, but only after they pull off a raid on another new hive of ghouls they've found, the Gourmet's restaurant. Except when they get to the restaurant, they find that every ghoul inside has been dead for days, maybe even weeks. With no idea who got there first, it just opens up new questions for them. After the massive raid on Aogiri and the prison break in the 23rd ward though, it could be any ghoul that has a bone to pick with the others. For now though, they pin this on the Gourmet as well, choosing to add it to his case file. They're also on the lookout for the binge eater, still with no idea that Rize is actually long gone and living on in the one they call the eye patch. Poor Eamon though, he's not very good with the ladies, especially not when said lady is the daughter of his dead superior. Shinohara gives him a little bit of advice, saying he should try to bond with Akira, share drinks, have dinners, talk about cases, things like that, but the guy just gets stonewalled at every turn. There's really no winning for him in this case, but nevertheless he keeps on putting in the effort. After all, he's a special investigator now, so he has to try to build up camaraderie wherever he can. Juzo meanwhile got upped to a rank 1 investigator, meaning he has access to a ton of new quinkes. That makes him go a little more bloodthirsty too, and he starts to get into quinke collecting much like Mado used to do. Even with him being weird about it though, they allow it because the Doves are about to go up against some much more dangerous ghouls in the form of Aogiri tree's top brass. To make matters even more complicated though, they have the total wildcard out there that is Kaneki and his newfound followers. Anteiku is still running as normal as well, and it looks like with the heat coming from everywhere else, they're being left alone for the most part. Whether that will continue though is something else entirely. We'll definitely continue making manga recaps though, just for you. Make sure to drop a like and comment so we know what you want more of. Whether it's Tokyo Ghoul or other horror-adjacent anime, we love bringing you the best recaps and breakdowns possible. Back at CCG headquarters, there's a new intern that's making himself friendly with the investigators and even manages to give them a lead on one of their cases chasing down Kaneki, none other than Hyde, his best friend. He took a part-time job at the CCG in the last 6 months, and in doing so, made himself a valuable source of information for the investigators. Meanwhile, Kaneki and his group consisting of Banjo, Shu, Hinami, and some of Banjo's followers are looking into Dr. Kano and trying to find the history of Rize. Their first lead ends up being one of the escaped convicts from the ghoul prison Koklia Shachi Hiroshima, the former ghoul leader of 6th Ward. While they know he shares the same last name with Rize, they're not sure why, and this guy is bad news whenever anyone gets on the wrong side of him. Unfortunately for Kaneki's group, he's aligned himself with Aogiri since leaving prison. They end up tracking down another lead though, following the breadcrumbs back to a small gang of ghouls in 6th Ward that used to work with Shachi. Unfortunately for them, their rendezvous is party crashed pretty hard when they try to get more info. 2 mysterious new ghouls attack, using the same Kagoon as Kaneki and Rize, revealing both of them are one-eyed ghouls as well. It seems to be getting a little crowded in the one-eyed ghoul space, doesn't it? Especially since they're supposed to be so rare. Either way, these new enemies are a threat and not aligned with Aogiri or any other known faction, making them total wildcards when it comes to who they're helping. Kaneki and Hinami take a day off to go to a book signing by Kaneki's favorite author, Sen Takatsuki, and end up having a long conversation with her. She's impressed by their knowledge of her books and reveals that her next story is going to be about a ghoul. She's definitely not what they expected, much more aloof and a younger woman than any of them pictured, but she ends up befriending Hinami and is very taken at how well she reads the more mature subject matter. After their meeting, Sen ends up visiting the CCG, having a meeting with Eamon where she asks for information about ghouls as research for her next book, while also telling him that she can help them if need be. He invites her in, passing through the RC gate with no issue to ensure she isn't a ghoul, and talk for a while. Keep up though, because this is where Tokyo Ghoul starts to go into breakneck pacing. Back at the CCG, Juzo and Shinohara get to visit the Quinque development facility where all the dove weapons are made. Turns out, Juzo put the finishing blows on Yamori back at the Aogiri raid, and as are the rules of finders keepers, he gets to keep his Kagune to make a Quinque out of. 6 months later, and it's finally ready to go, with the designer showing off a new scythe that would make the Grim Reaper think he's going a little overboard. Juzo takes it though and starts to train, showing off just how stupid deadly he can be when he's let loose. Eamon decides it's time to go pay dear old dad a visit, or at least the closest thing he had to a dad, which is a former priest now locked up in Cochlea, a ghoul who was feasting on the kids in his orphanage. Talk about unresolved childhood trauma. Eamon thinks he can get a clue on what to do next, but the father is less than willing to give any straight advice. Instead, he plays up the Hannibal Lecter role, feeding Eamon little riddles about chasing the white rabbit instead of Alice. As if Wonderland wasn't confusing enough, Kaneki and his group finally find a real lead, an abandoned mansion purchased by Dr. Kano years ago. Formerly the home of another doctor, his wife, and 2 daughters before the parents were murdered by a ghoul a few years back. They find out that there's a significant underground space to the mansion though, hidden away from prying eyes. They leave Hinami at their base, making their way to the mansion late one night to find answers. Unfortunately for them, they're not the only ones that found out about this place. Aogiri and CCG both are tracking Kano as well and have narrowed in on the abandoned mansion. This place looks like it's straight out of Resident Evil 2 and might be hiding some even worse horrors if they don't all stay on their toes. Kaneki's group arrives first, finding no resistance outside or even in the upper floors of the mansion. Instead, the place just seems abandoned. Soon enough though, they find a small passage to some underground tunnels, in turn finding a wall that can only be broken by contact with the concentrated RC cells in a Kagune. As they penetrate further towards what lies beneath, they're attacked by Aogiri. Naki, a ghoul who was madly in love with Yamori, wants revenge on Kaneki. Meanwhile, he's also brought Eto, one of Aogiri's top brass, to find whatever Kaneki's Gorup is after. Though Naki wants to go toe-to-toe with Kaneki and get his revenge, Shu says that he'll take him on instead. The battle is unintentionally hilarious thanks to Naki being a total idiot. Turns out he was locked up in Cochlea and freed alongside many of the others. He also keeps calling Shu the American instead of the Gourmet, and that almost annoys Shu more than the fight itself. Still though, they fight on as Kaneki moves deeper into the facility, with Banjo staying behind to try fending off Ito. Even though Banjo is, well, he's not strong, that's for sure. Kaneki's progress doesn't take long to get impeded though, as Shachi appears out of nowhere and starts to fight. The two battle it out, with Kaneki letting a new and improved version of his Kagune loose. In the 6 months since he's been out of Anteiku, Kaneki still hasn't eaten any human flesh, but he's grown stronger by devouring other ghouls. While it's made his Kagune strong though, cannibalism always brings a side of crazy to the table with it, and that's starting to press even further into Kaneki's mind as he desperately fights for his life. Shachi isn't a pushover though. This guy was the leader of the 6th Ward for a reason, and it's because he can beat ass with one hand tied behind his back and both eyes closed if he so chooses. He smashes Kaneki through the floor, causing him to land below in a huge lab that makes them both stop to take in their surroundings. Every wall in this room is lined with pods, each containing someone that was once human. Now, they're filled with the failed experiments of Dr. Kano, people that weren't able to fully take on on the ghoul characteristics of their transplant like Kaneki was. And in the middle of it all, suspended in a chamber and drugged, is Rize. She's been alive the whole time, a prisoner of Dr. Kano, as he continues putting pieces of her into humans to make knockoff one-eyed ghouls. Kano suddenly appears, pulling a Bond villain level introduction by asking Kaneki if he's been taking his transplant medication. Of all things to ask the kid, he ruined the life of. Back in the other part of the base, Shu and Naki are trading blows, with Shu going on some unhinged internal monologue about how he can't let anyone else eat Kaneki before him. After a few minutes though, the two have to combine their forces, with the two girl ghouls coming in to attack them both. Their names are revealed too by Yushiro and Kuro, and while they're sisters, that's not the most important reveal yet. They spar with the two ghouls for a bit, before yet another set of party crashers step in, the CCG. Everything goes to hell in a handbasket, with Shu and Naki now having to team up not only to fight the sisters, but also Juzo, Amon, and Akira of the CCG. Meanwhile, Inspector Shinohara goes ahead, recovered from his previous fight with the owl and ready to take on whatever lies in wait further into the lab. Poor guy doesn't know what he's about to get into either. Down below in the main lab, Kano reveals that he was the one who orchestrated all this in the pursuit of creating one-eyed ghouls, and that Rize was the only ghoul able to successfully handle the repeated transplants. He's been taking her kakuho, the ghoul organ that controls Kagune and RC cells, and transplanting it into humans before feeding her just enough to regenerate it for more experiments. Which is some real war crime level stuff if we're being honest. Like, damn dude, chill out on the mad science. Even Dr. Frankenstein had some ethics, for crying out loud. While they're distracted by these revelations though, yet another person makes their presence known. Ghouls are coming into this mansion left and right like it's the Royal Rumble. They're just missing theme music, and the latest is, "Bah God, that's Yomo." He dives right down, breaking the door on Rize's cage and pulling her out before telling Kaneki that he needs to speak to Yoshimura, then dipping out like modern Tokyo tuxedo mask without helping at all. Kaneki meanwhile gets snuck up on by Shinohara, finally arrived with his upgraded Quinke in hand and ready to fight. Kano takes an offer from Shachi to join Aogiri, leaving Kaneki and Shinohara to go at it while he grabs whatever he can. The fight between them initially looks like Kaneki will win easy, but Shinohara turns up the heat and starts blasting his Kagune away with a huge sword. It's only a matter of moments before that cannibalism craziness starts to take hold of the kid, and his Kagune starts to change. Turns out, some ghouls can achieve what's called Kakuja, making them even more powerful and transforming their body through an advanced form of Kagune. Kaneki begins taking on the appearance of a centipede, with a huge mask of RC cells appearing to cover his face as he fights on, losing his mind a little more with every blow. Meanwhile, Akira and Amon are having a time holding off Naki and Shu, even with their advanced Quinkes. Suzuya, meanwhile, has taken to chasing down the one-eyed ghouls, using a stolen Quinke consisting of 52 different throwing knives that he's making sure to stab each one of into the girls. Flashback time. Juzo, when he was a child, was kept by a ghoul and used for entertainment, made to fight in gladiatorial-style matches against other human pets. He was her best though, and always won his battles, though her form of congratulations was hanging him up from the ceiling by fish hooks run through his skin, which probably isn't good for mental development. After that ghoul was killed, Juzo was taken in by the CCG and admitted to the academy, where he began to train to become an investigator. Around the same time, these Yushiro and Kuro were also admitted to the academy after their parents, the original owners of the mansion, were murdered by a ghoul. They had bright futures ahead of them too, unlike the young Juzo who was struggling to fit in. Things came to a head one day as the young boy was found outside the grounds, poking a dead cat. It's revealed there have been dozens of pet slayings around the campus lately, and Juzo is the one blamed for it. Not long after, Yushiro and Kuro meet Dr. Kano, a former CCG medical researcher, and are brought into his fold. They're given Rize's organs in a transplant, turning them into one-eyed ghouls, now in service of their father, Dr. Kano. Juzo recognizes the girls from their time in the academy together, but it does nothing to sway his bloodlust and need to destroy ghouls. In case anyone hasn't gotten it quite yet, this dude is damaged with a capital D and doesn't feel emotions like other humans do. He puts a huge hole right through Yushiro, who gets carried off by Kuro to hopefully find Kano who can heal her, but the damage may be too much for even him to fix. Back in the other room, Amon has taken off to go after Shinohara and provide backup. When he gets to the lab down below, he finds Kaneki feasting on Shinohara's body, still enclosed in the quinquay. Kaneki runs off rather than get into another fight, his mind still clouded by the effects of becoming the centipede, and Amon decides to save his superior officer rather than give chase. It pays off because Kaneki wasn't actually eating Shinohara, but still subconsciously avoiding the human and eating the quinquay instead. Amon calls for med evac while Kaneki makes his way backwards. Shu manages to get away from the fight as Akira starts to take down Naki, leaving him to his own fate. As he's wandering through the tunnels, he finds Banjo injured and makes the decision to off him then and there so he can't get in the way of his future Kaneki happy meal. Right as he's about to attack him though, Kaneki appears, though he's still in a fugue state between consciousness and delirium. Banjo steps toward him, telling him that it's okay, when suddenly Kaneki attacks him, much like he attacked Yomo months ago after his first battle with Amon. Luckily, Banjo might be weak, but his Kagune presents itself, a healing Kagune that manages to recover his wounds while he talks his friend down. Despite everything they've been through, they're all able to walk out alive, with Kaneki taking a deserved rest once they get back to their base. Kuro finds Kano and begs him to heal Yushiro, but he tells her there's nothing he can do and to just leave her behind. Kuro refuses, staying with her dying sister as the doctor leaves them for Aogiri, taking his research with him. He promises Tatara that their newfound arrangement will be fruitful, and Aogiri wants him to make a whole army of artificial one-eyes, enough to take over Tokyo. Down in the lab, Shinohara is still alive and breathing, not nearly as injured as thought. He's taken to safety, and the raid on Kano's lab ends in more questions than answers for everyone. A few days later, Shu invites Hinami to go out to get coffee, while Kaneki leaves for a while to go see Uta. The two bond a bit, with Hinami just glad to be out of the base for a bit, but it's not long before Shu goes into his old ways. Turns out, his plan is to season Kaneki by destroying everything he holds dear before devouring him. This guy seriously can't get a clue that Kaneki could kill him in moments if he chose to. The delusion is thick. While Shu goes to the restroom, Hinami is surprised to see Sen Takatsuki sitting at a table nearby, which isn't too surprising since Shu had mentioned earlier that she was known to frequent this cafe when he brought Kaneki there months ago. They have a little talk before Shu comes back, just barely missing Sen as she leaves. On their way home though, they run into Tuka and Nishio on their way to get coffee beans for Anteiku. They ask about Kaneki, but only get told some BS by Shu about how he doesn't need them anymore. They brush him off though, knowing his opinion is worth less than garbage. Meanwhile, over at Uta's, Kaneki is getting a little bit of background on Yomo and their life before Anteiku. Turns out that Yomo was just a headstrong kid once, full of anger for the doves who killed his sister, especially Special Investigator Arima, the golden boy of the CCG. Uta at the time was the leader of the Third Ward, though Yomo could give him more than a run for his money in a good fight. They fought on and off for a while before becoming friends through it all. But one day, a dove raid on the Third Ward almost killed them both. Arima arrives and Yomo is ready to risk it all for revenge, when suddenly an owl swoops in, saving Yomo from certain death and taking him under his wing. Yoshimura becomes a father figure for the young ghoul, giving him a job at Anteiku, first making coffee, then handling things behind the scenes. Uta tells Kaneki that if he wants to know more, he's going to have to go talk to Yomo himself. He leaves, heading over to Yomo's place that looks more like a glorified shipping container. It's revealed that he has Rize locked up, as she's in such an extreme state of starvation she doesn't even know who she is anymore. Another level of hangry for a ghoul. Yomo, for his part, doesn't explain a whole lot, just reinforcing his point that Kaneki needs to talk to Yoshimura for the answers he's after. Kaneki stays, trying to speak with Rize but getting next to nowhere. Then after speaking with Yomo for a few more minutes about Anteiku, he heads towards the cafe. The next stop on Ken Kaneki's bizarre adventure is the most important though, as we finally get the truth straight from the owl's mouth. Yoshimura tells Kaneki a story of a young man named Kozen, who long ago was a cleaner for an organized group of ghouls. These ghouls were meaner than Aogiri even, making the mob look like kittens in comparison. He was one of their best too, able to take down anyone with ease thanks to his intense power. One day though, typical with how these things go, he met a woman and fell in love. She was human though, and despite their differences, they managed to do the deed just right and make a baby. Not that the baby would be viable, considering just how much a baby ghoul in the womb needs to feed on human nutrients to survive. This woman was something else though, and despite how much her body would hate it, she started eating humans, ensuring that her baby would make it. Kozan, in the meantime, tries to leave the ghoul organization, but it's too late. They've found out about her, and even worse, she's an investigative journalist looking into their dealings. Kozan gets told that he can leave, after one last job, of course. It breaks him, but the woman tells him it's okay, she understands, and to look after their child. Knowing that the organization will try to turn their kid into a weapon though, Kozan hides him with the ghouls of the 24th Ward before disappearing himself, taking on the name Yoshimura and opening a cafe to help other ghouls who have taken a vow of peace instead of violence. Not that lasts very long. Meanwhile, his kid grows up to become the fearsome one-eyed owl of the 24th Ward, founding Aogiri tree as part of his revenge against those that tore his family apart before he could ever know what they are. Yoshimura tells Kaneki that the reason he took him in was because he saw something in him, a kindness that hopefully could one day help to save his son from the monster he's become. With this, he invites Kaneki back to Anteiku, though it's right as Tuka and Nishio walk through the door, returning with the beans they were sent to pick up. Tuka wastes no time slapping the crap out of Kaneki harder than Will Smith slapping an Oscar host walking off in anger at him. Kaneki gets it though and walks back home while thinking on the offer. Back at the CCG, Amon and Akira go to pick up new quinkes, one that Akira has spent a lot of time designing for Amon. After they visit the lab though, they make another stop, Mado's grave. They talk for a moment, Akira mentioning that Amon is the only man who's taken care of her other than her father, and before you know it, she tries to kiss him, though he puts a hand over her mouth to stop her. They head back to the main office, unsure of what to do about this development. Not that they have time to think about much else, as they're summoned for a special task force almost immediately and told they have a new mission, exterminating the owl, which the CCG has located at a small cafe in the 20th Ward. As part of preparation for a raid like this, everyone is told to create their last will and testament. Seido, an investigator who was peers with Akira in the academy, has a particularly hard time with this, while Akira, Amon, and the others leave virtually nothing behind. Juzo makes his into a paper airplane, throwing it from the rooftop and watching it go. We find out the raid on Anteiku is all hands on deck, with Kuwoira, Shinohara, and even Arima joining in the fight. Kaneki, back at the hideout with the rest of his group, makes the announcement that he's breaking up the band. Everyone is shocked to hear it, wondering what to do next, when Kaneki announces he'll be returning to Anteiku and that he wants the others to go with him, even Shu, despite knowing that the psychopath wants to eat him at every possible turn. Even after all this, Kaneki is a little too trusting. They all agree though and make their plans to go back to Anteiku, working behind the scenes like Yomo does for the cafe. Days later, Kaneki is having coffee at a small shop when he hears some CCG investigators speaking on their lunch break. These idiots are just blabbing loud as they can about the Anteiku operation, shaking Kaneki to his core. He warns everyone, telling Yoshimura of the impending danger. The night finally comes. Yoshimura has shut the cafe down, getting rid of anything that could lead to the ghouls that patron the business, and is getting ready to make a final stand on his own. To their credit, Enji and Irima, two of the oldest serving staff there, say that they plan on staying by his side in any effort to repay him for what he's done for them. The CCG gathers outside, evacuating the surrounding areas and preparing their first assault when they notice two people standing outside the front door of Anteku, the Devil Ape, and the Black Dog. Infamous ghoul gang leaders from years ago are waiting with their entire gang to take on the doves that come for them. Enji and Irima end up taking on some the smaller investigators while the main forces head for the roof, Juzo doing so by stealing yet another of Marud's bikes and riding it up. The matchup split off, with Eamon and Akira taking on some of the lower-ranking gang members, while other special investigators take on the Devil Ape and Black Dog. The rest begin to face down the owl on the roof, and bad news for them, Yoshimura isn't pulling his punches this time. They've decided if Anteiku goes down, they're going down swinging. Tuka, though she wants to join the fight, is back at home. Finally, she steels her nerves enough to try and step out of the door, only to be met by Yomo, who stops her, telling her to live on for the others' sake. The fight with the owl is intense, with Kuwaira, Shinohara, Juzo, and a couple of others taking them on head-to-head with the most powerful Quinkes possible. Yoshimura holds his own though, and it's only a matter of time before the others take an injury. They persevere, fighting through it like badasses and finally managing to damage Yoshimura. Up above, Kaneki is watching from the same roof that the steel beams fell from all those months ago. Nishio comes to speak to him as well, telling him that he plans to get the hell out of the 20th ward on the off chance that he's recognized as a ghoul from the Anteiku staff registry. He does say that he's going to go sleep with Kimi before he leaves though. Man has his priorities, I guess. That's not all though, as Shu shows up then to try and kill Kaneki himself, desperate to keep him from jumping into the battle before he can get a good taste. It's useless, and Kaneki stops him easily, thanking him for how much he cares. Seems a little delusional, but that is how the relationship between them goes, isn't it? Kaneki joins the fray below, confronting Eamon, who has an entire internal monologue about how he wants to fight him, but how he doesn't want Kaneki to die because he feels like they're kindred spirits. He does what he can, but in the end it isn't quite enough, until suddenly the Quinke researcher appears at the perfect time to throw him two things: a Quinke battle armor like Shinohara uses, and a newly improved Quinke that Akira designed especially for Amon. Kaneki goes into his Kakuja state, but Event Hat isn't quite enough compared to Amon's newfound power. The two deal mortal blows to each other, with Amon fainting as Kaneki begins to go crazy again from hunger for human flesh. Desperate to get away, trying not to eat the dove, he disappears down into a sewer hole to try and escape or regroup. Up on the roof, there's a whole new problem. They've taken down the owl, but now they have to deal with the one-eyed owl instead, who's suddenly shown up in his full Kakuja form. This dude isn't playing around either, almost immediately slicing a leg off of both Juzo and Shinohara each, then throwing Kuroiwa and the others off the building. Juzo has a flashback as he considers all Shinohara has done for him. It's revealed that Juzo was the one who found the animals dead on campus back in his academy days, and that they were actually being K8'd by an instructor while he took the blame for it. Not that anyone would believe him though, because he was a former ghoul prisoner. Back in the present, he's desperately trying to get himself up, seeing the one-eyed owl moving in on Shinohara to devour him. Juzo realizes that even though he doesn't feel emotions the same as others, he does actually care about someone, and pulls himself up, using his new Quinke as a crutch for his missing leg while he throws knives at the terrifying ghoul before him. Down below in the sewers, Kaneki is losing his damn mind, which he's spent a lot of time doing lately, almost like it's a new hobby. He knows that if he doesn't eat some human flesh soon, he's going to have an even worse time, but he's desperately trying to hold himself together when suddenly a light appears in the darkness, along with a voice telling him everything will be okay. Hide. His best friend runs to him, tearing the Kakuja mask off while telling Kaneki that it's okay. He's known about him being a ghoul all along. He mentions that there's a rough battle ahead and that Kaneki isn't going to make it out unless he's ready to fight at full force, telling him that he needs to prepare himself for a tough battle. Then everything goes dark. When Kaneki wakes up, he can taste human blood and his wounds are healed. Hyde is nowhere to be seen. Up above, the other special investigators have converged on the one-eyed owl, making every effort they can to team up and fight him. It's not going so well, since they only have backup Quinkes though, their others being broken during the fights with Enji and Irima down below. Kaneki, back in the tunnels, stumbles into a large opening finally, seeing one lone person standing in a field of what he believes are flowers. His mind is still cloudy, reeling while wondering where Hyde went and refusing to accept the obvious answer that Hyde is now digesting in his belly. As he grows closer though, he realizes that these aren't flowers they're standing in, but piles of ghoul corpses from the Black Dober and Devil Ape gangs. Arima stands in the middle, Quinke at the ready. The poor kid barely has a chance. He tries to fight, but Arima is using cheat codes essentially, stabbing his Quinke right through Kaneki's back before ramming the point of his sword through his eye, essentially breaking Kaneki's brain. He starts to spiral, seeing hallucinations of his mother before finding a younger version of himself playing in a sandbox. Kaneki realizes that his habit of putting others before himself all this time wasn't out of kindness, but out of fear of abandonment. Coming to terms, his ghoul self and human human self embrace, finally becoming one. Up above, Inspector Saito tells Akira he's going to find Amon, worried that he's injured. He does find him, but unfortunately, he's not the first one there. Tatara has arrived, and though Amon tries to make an effort to fight off the second-in-command of Aogiri, it's not enough. He and Saito are critically wounded, kidnapped by Aogiri, and taken off to their base. Up on the rooftop, the one-eyed owl is absolutely wrecking everything in sight, though taking a little damage from the investigators who showed up. Juzo has been evacuated along with Shinohara, and things begin to heat up when Arima and his squad finally arrive. The best investigator around spars with the owl, beat for beat, doing some good damage considering the strength of his opponent. The one-eyed owl has finally had enough though. It picks up Yoshimura from the ground, stuffing him in its mouth before fleeing the scene. Though nobody in the investigators realize it, the child has just rescued the father, and that's not going to be a good thing in the future to come. As the owl escapes, finding a safe spot on a rooftop nearby, it sheds the kakuja masking it to reveal their true identity, the author, Sen Takatsuki. She regurgitates her father, smiling as one eye turns red, and says that she hasn't taken that much damage in a while. What in the world are her plans for the future though? The raid on Anteiku ends with the CCG counting their dead and wounded. Yoshimura has been kidnapped by Aogiri, Aiman and Seido as well. The Devil Ape and Black Dog, though injured, have disappeared without a trace to fight again another day. Meanwhile, the fate of Ken Kaneki, after his fight with Inspector Arima, is presumed to be dead. The next day, Juzo visits Shinohara in the hospital, being wheeled in with his missing leg bandaged. He finds his mentor in a coma, the doctors saying that he'll likely never recover due to brain damage from extreme loss of blood. Shinohara's wife arrives, comforting Juzo and telling him that he did all he could, that the inspector viewed him as a surrogate son, and that she's there for him if he needs anything. This only strengthens Juzo's resolve for the future, and he makes an oath to slay the one-eyed owl. Nishio ends up going back to the rooftop the next morning, where Shu is still laying in a broken heap and being a general sad sack about Kaneki disappearing. He drops a coffee by Shu's head, telling him to get up and that there's a lot of work to be done. Elsewhere, Tuka tells Yomo that she doesn't want Anteiku to just be a memory, and the two start planning on opening their own cafe to help ghouls the same way Yoshimura helped them for the past years. Somewhere in the 24th ward, Aogiri is looking over their new subjects with Dr. Kano, who mentions that the ghoul investigators they've captured will be much better for their experiments. In test pods around them are Yoshimura, Seido, and Amon, all still alive and soon to be experimented on, turned into artificial one-eyed ghouls like Kaneki. The crazy part? Kaneki was just a pre-trial experiment before Yushiro and Kuro, with Kano still holding a lot of big plans for the newcomers. Finally, weeks later at the grave of Inspector Mado, Akira tells her father how she's been promoted and will be given a new partner, some young rank 3 investigator that Arima assigned personally. She's barely through her talks when her new partner appears, just like she did to Amon months ago. This kid has white and black hair, a kind smile, and introduces himself as Heise Sasaki. But when we get a good look at his face, it's obvious this is Ken Kaneki. Hell of a place to end part 1 of Tokyo Ghoul, isn't it? The adventures of Kaneki and the other ghouls are only going to get more insane from here, and they come back Naruto Shippuden style in a second part, Tokyo Ghoul Re. We'll have a full breakdown of that coming up, so make sure to like and subscribe to get notifications when it's out. Thanks for watching.